Ever since Timothy had moved in with his uncle's wife had shown a clear dislike for him. "Why are you even here?" she would sneer at him whenever they crossed paths. "You're just a burden on us." Timothy did his best to ignore her behavior, but it was getting harder and harder to do. One day, she cornered him in the kitchen. "I'm tired of you lazing around all day," she spat. "You need to start pulling your weight around here." "I do my fair share of the chores," Timothy replied, trying to keep his voice even. "Your fair share isn't enough," his uncle's wife snapped back. "I want you to do more, and I want it done right." After the incident with the errand, his uncle's wife's hostility towards him seemed to reach a new level. She would glare at him whenever he entered a room. One day, Timothy decided to confront her about it. "Excuse me, ma'am," he said tentatively. "Have I done something to upset you?" His uncle's wife laughed bitterly. "Oh, so now you're trying to play the victim," she said. "You're just lazy and useless, and you're never going to amount to anything." Timothy felt his face flush with anger, but he tried to stay calm. "I don't understand why you're treating me this way," he said. "I'm doing the best I can." "Your best isn't good enough," his uncle's wife spat. "And don't you dare talk back to me." Despite all this, Timothy tried his best to be polite and respectful towards his uncle's wife. "Is there anything else you need me to do?" he would ask, trying to diffuse the tension between them. But it seemed like no matter what he did, she would always find fault with him. One day, Timothy was feeling unwell and didn't want to venture out into the cold. When his uncle's wife asked him to run an errand, he politely declined, saying he was feeling sick. Timothy's uncle's wife couldn't believe Timothy had declined to run the errand for her. "What do you mean you're sick?" she asked, her voice rising. "You were fine this morning when I saw you." "I'm sorry, Mom," Timothy replied, "but I really don't feel well." His uncle's wife narrowed her eyes. "I don't believe you," she said. "You're just lazy and don't want to do any work around here." Timothy was taken aback by her words. He had always tried to do his fair share of the chores, and he was genuinely not feeling well, but he knew there was no convincing her otherwise. Later that day, Timothy's uncle returned home, and his wife wasted no time in telling him what had happened. "Your nephew assaulted me," she said, tears in her eyes. "He refused to run an errand for me, and then hit me when I confronted him." Timothy was shocked when his uncle turned to him with a look of anger and disgust. "I can't believe you would do something like that," his uncle said, shaking his head. "You're not welcome in this house anymore. Pack your things and leave." Timothy tried to plead his innocence, but his uncle would not listen. "I don't want to hear it," he said. Timothy left and went straight to his room. Timothy sat on the edge of the bed, his head in his hands, tears streaming down his face. He couldn't believe what had just happened. He had been falsely accused of something he didn't do, and now he was being thrown out of the only home he had. "What am I going to do?" he whispered to himself. "Where am I supposed to go?" As he sat there lost in thought, the door to his room suddenly opened, and his uncle's wife walked in. Timothy quickly wiped away his tears, hoping she wouldn't see. "Get up," she sneered, looking down at him with disdain. "Don't just sit there feeling sorry for yourself. You brought this on yourself with your lazy and violent behavior." "I didn't do anything wrong," Timothy said, his voice shaking with emotion. "Of course you didn't," his uncle's wife replied sarcastically. "Just like you didn't do anything wrong when you stole money from us last month, or when you broke that vase in the living room. You're never going to amount to anything," his uncle's wife continued. "No one is going to want you around if you keep acting like this. You're a burden and a disgrace." With that, she turned and left the room, leaving Timothy alone with his thoughts and his regrets. That same night, Timothy had been wandering the streets for hours, trying to figure out where to go after being kicked out of his uncle's house. He found himself in a dark and deserted part of the town. Suddenly, he heard footsteps behind him. He turned around to see a man holding a gun. The man demanded that Timothy hand over all of his valuables. "I don't have anything on me," Timothy said. The man didn't believe him and approached him menacingly. "Please don't hurt me," Timothy pleaded. The man raised his gun, and Timothy knew he had to act fast. "Where's your phone and wallet?" the man demanded. I don't have them with me, Timothy gasped, struggling to catch his breath. The man grew more agitated and raised his gun again. Timothy knew he was in serious trouble. Please, he said, his voice shaking. I'm telling the truth. I don't have anything on me. The man hesitated for a moment, and Timothy saw a glimmer of hope. But then, without warning, the man pulled the trigger. The gunshot echoed through the empty streets, and Timothy fell to the ground, his body racked with pain. With a curse, the man turned and ran off into the night, leaving Timothy lying there alone and bleeding. As Timothy struggled to stay conscious, he felt his life slipping away. He thought of his uncle's wife and wondered if she would even care that he was gone. He wished he had stood up to her instead of letting her drive him away. As the darkness closed in around him, Timothy took his last breath and died. The next morning, as Timothy's uncle and his wife sat in the living room, the doorbell rang. Timothy's uncle went to answer it and found a police officer standing on the porch. "Good morning, sir," the officer said. "I'm sorry to inform you that we found a body matching the description of your nephew last night." Timothy's uncle's wife gasped, her hand flying to her mouth in shock. "Oh my God," she whispered. "Is he?" "I'm afraid so," the officer replied. "We're still investigating, but it appears he was the victim of a mugging gone wrong." Timothy's uncle looked stricken. "I can't believe this is happening," he said, his voice shaking. "We were just trying to help him." "I'm so sorry for your loss," the officer said. "We'll need you to come down to the station to identify the body." As the officer left, Timothy's uncle's wife turned to her husband. "I need to talk to you," she said, her voice trembling. "It's about Timothy." Timothy's uncle looked at his wife with a mixture of confusion and concern. "What is it?" "What about Timothy?" he asked. "I need to tell you something," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. I lied to you about what happened between us." "What do you mean?" Timothy's uncle asked, his brow furrowing. "I accused Timothy of assaulting me, but it wasn't true," she confessed, tears streaming down her face. "I was angry with him, and I wanted to get back at him for something he had done. I didn't think it would go this far. I didn't think he would leave, and now he's gone." Timothy's uncle was stunned. "You lied about something like that. Why would you do something so terrible?" "I don't know," she said, shaking her head. "I was just so angry, and I took it out on him. I didn't realize how much damage I was causing. And now he's dead because of me. I can't live with myself." Timothy's uncle didn't know what to say. He felt anger and sadness and confusion, all at once. Timothy's uncle's wife broke down in tears. "I'm so sorry," she sobbed. "I never meant for any of this to happen. I can't believe I fell for your lies," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "I should have known Timothy wouldn't do something like that." "I'm so sorry," his wife replied, her own tears flowing freely. "I was scared and I didn't know what to do. I didn't mean for any of this to happen. I just wish I could go back and do things differently," Timothy's uncle said, his voice breaking with emotion. "Maybe if I had talked to Timothy instead of believing you, he would still be alive." They both sat in silence for a few moments, lost in their own thoughts and feelings of regret. "I don't know how we can ever make this right," Timothy's uncle's wife said, her voice barely audible. "We can't," Timothy's uncle replied. "All we can do now is try to make peace with what happened and remember Timothy for the kind and caring person he was." They spent the rest of the day in mourning, praying for Timothy's soul, and trying to come to terms with the tragedy that had befallen their family. As a Christian, it's important to remember that false accusations can have severe consequences for both the accuser and the accused. Forgiveness is a key tenet of Christianity, and in this story, we see how forgiveness could have prevented the tragic ending. We should strive to be compassionate and understanding towards others, even when they make mistakes. We should also be willing to forgive others, just as God has forgiven us for our own mistakes and transgressions. Until we meet again with another story, remain blessed. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more videos.